Hey guys, I'm Smitty, back with another 3rd gen 4Runner video. This is my 2002 4Runner. I've had this thing for 8 years now and I love it. And over that time I've made some changes to this 4Runner. Some big, some small, but I thought it'd be a neat idea to do 8 things, my top 8 mods, changes that I've done to this 4Runner that have helped with either camping, road trips, or daily driving. Let's get into it. So mod number 8 is one of the easier mods to do and doesn't cost a whole lot, and that's being able to see your 4Runner's computer information from the OBD2 port. So down here, I've got a Bluetooth OBD2 adapter. These are pretty inexpensive on Amazon. Just put it up in the port, and then I've got an older Android phone. Doesn't have service, but I can still do Bluetooth connection, still works to show the information. So I'm running the Torque Pro app for Android. Couple notes, it does have to be an Android device to work with that app. I think there's some for Apple, but I don't think they work, honestly. Everybody uses Android, and I do too, and I've never had an issue with it. And you do have to pay for the Pro version of the app. Not sponsored, but I think it's $5. You pay $5, you've got the app. It's not a subscription fee or anything like that. But then you can get the full functionality, no ads, and you can customize your home screen, your gauges to look like anything you want to. You can change the background, the colors, the shapes. You can do a ton of stuff. This is how I have mine set up. I like to have all this information kind of real time. I've got it mounted right here in a RAM mount, kind of low on the windshield so it doesn't take up or obscure my view while driving. But the two I guess gauges that I look at the most are the coolant temperature and the transmission temperature. It will show you down to the decimal what that is. It will also keep track of what the lows and highs are. So if you did happen to run a little hot on something, it'll show you what that high was if you didn't happen to catch it when it happened. I'm pretty paranoid about the transmission temperature, so always being able to see that is pretty sweet. If you're off-roading, if you're towing something, if you're going up a lot of mountain grades, just a lot of uphill driving, being able to see that in real time down to the decimal is pretty sweet. With this app, you can check your check engine light. There's a ton of functionality with this app. So I leave this up here in the RAM mount. I've got a charging cable going from a power inverter here. I ran it up under the dash, comes out by the door right here, and then I can plug it in. So this can stay on when I'm driving. If I'm parking in a sketchy area or something like that, I will pop this out of the mount and take it with me, put it in the glove box or something. So yeah, that is how I read my computer's information from the 4Runner right here, almost like a second little mini gauge cluster. So mod number 7 is the ARB Awning and Room. I've had these for a few years now and I love it, but the reason this is so high on the list is that I just wish I used these more. I've got it on and mounted for some daily driving right now, which I'm getting overlanding points looking cool. But of course, this shines the most on camping trips and road trips. The big downside to this is the same as a rooftop tent, is that anytime you have this out or deployed, if you've got to move the vehicle, you got to pack it up. And I can do this by myself. It's pretty cumbersome and awkward, but I can get this out and put it back in by myself. But the awning room does make a pretty sweet tent. The way that works is the awning is out and deployed, and then it just clips to the poles, got its own floor, its own roof, and windows and doors. It pretty much makes a tent under the awning. You can roll up the sides and just use it as a screen room as well. Now I don't have an aftermarket roof rack. I've just got the stock crossbars on there. The way that I mounted this is I drilled holes in the crossbars and then just bolted it straight through there. I've got some pretty heavy duty washers in there. That way when I really do crank and tighten this down, that I'm not crushing those little aluminum bars too much. Sounds kind of flimsy, but I've driven this like this for a few years now. When we did our 6,000 mile road trip out west, this is the way that it was mounted. Had no issues. So high winds, trying to do 80 downhill, maybe. That thing has stayed in place, so no issue there. So mod number 6 is the lift. I've got a 3-inch lift on the 4Runner. I rode the stock suspension for a long time, but it just came to the point that it was done. I think I was at like 260, 270,000 miles. The ride was getting harsh, starting to sag quite a bit. So replaced it. Like I said, I always knew that I wanted to lift a 4Runner. So I did the very common Bilstein 5100s and the Old Man Emu springs. I went for the heavier spring rate. So I've got the 883 coils in the front and the 891s in the rear. I did that just because the weight of the front bumper and the cargo system in the back. I wanted to get a true 3-inch lift. I didn't want to get a 3-inch lift, normal weight, and it just sagged kind of down to 2. Wanted to get the full 3-inch, that way if I did step up to 285s, I would have that extra clearance. So let's go on to mod number 5. So mod number 5 is the box. That's just what I call it. Some people call it a sleeping platform, cargo system, drawer system, whatever you'd like to call it. To give you guys a real quick tour, got the 2 drawers right here, 2 very deep drawers. I've got the pockets on the side as well, and it's cut to where it does open with the rear seat in. So nice storage spot down there. Storage down here as well. I've got my tool bag. I still have access to the side cubby panel. And then this top board, when the seat is folded down, will fold into a sleeping platform right there. I did this, my friend and I built this probably the first year that I had the 4Runner, so it's probably going on 7 years. Just one Saturday, less than $100 for all the hinges and wood and everything like that. And it has been awesome. There's a few summers I was a camp director and I used my 4Runner all over the camp, hauling whatever was needed pretty much. So this thing has seen the abuse. Water coolers, firewood, program supplies, whatever you can think of. You know, a lot of random stuff thrown here in the 4Runner. So I need some advice, guys that have storage systems like this in the back. I don't know which way to go next. Do I reassemble? Because it's looking pretty grody. I want to kind of spruce it up a bit, give it some more life. Do I reassemble it and put a nice finished stained piece of wood on top and like the outer boards? Or do I wrap it in carpet to try my best to match the 4Runner interior? Like I said, it's seen the abuse. I just don't know if I go the finished wood route, which would be more durable, or the wrapped in carpet make it look nicer. So if you have a storage box, if you have one or the other, I'd love to get your input on which one you guys prefer. So mod number 4 is the transmission cooler mounted right there. I don't have a ton to say about this, but I think that every 3rd gen 4Runner needs a transmission cooler. A few years ago, I was driving my wife and her parents through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and just 10 minutes of uphill driving, I could see through the OBD2 info that my transmission was nearing 300 degrees, which I think is way too hot. I think I read somewhere that the check engine light for the transmission temp doesn't come on until like 340 or something, which is, it's crazy. So I installed a B&M transmission cooler. I've got it mounted right here in front of the condenser and the radiator. When you look into doing this, there's like a big debate if you should cool your transmission fluid solely with the transmission cooler or also run it in line with the radiator. When I put mine in, I had just recently put in a new radiator, so I have everything running in line. So transmission fluid is running both through the radiator like it is from the factory and the transmission cooler. So that works for me here in East Tennessee, but if you're in a colder climate, it may make your transmission run too cool. But like I said, it works well for me, and no matter what I'm doing, if I'm towing or doing mountain passes or whatever, my transmission hardly ever gets above 200 degrees, which is pretty nice. So it's almost time for the top 3 mods, but before we do that, I want to do a few honorable mentions. First one is the floor mats. All-weather floor mats are a super nice touch to keep things nice and tidy. These are the Husky liners. I've got them front and rear. WeatherTech are great as well. Swapping out the stock bulbs for LED bulbs are a really nice touch, nice and bright. Like a lot of people, I have snapped my power antenna, and when you do that, it makes a terrible grinding sound every time you turn the radio on and off. It's pretty embarrassing in parking lots, so I swapped mine out for a Tacoma antenna. It's honestly pretty hard to do because it's really narrow in the fender where you have to bolt that up, but now I can just unscrew it on and off anytime that I need to. And last honorable mention is a power inverter. My dad always had one in his truck growing up, and it's surprising how much you will use these once you have them. So just having an outlet and additional charging ports is super nice. So mod number 3 are the radios. And these are in the top 3 because I use the radio every time that I'm in the 4Runner. What I did is I took out the stock double DIN radio, took those out, and I put in a single DIN Kenwood head unit. So it's a new head unit, so I can finally use Bluetooth to listen to music, listen to podcasts. I've got the microphone ran up here under the trim for hands-free calling, works pretty well. And then under that, I've got a CB mounted. I've only seen one other person do this, but I thought it was an awesome idea because more common CB mounting location is right here in the ashtray. The problem with that is that the radios that fit in there, the little Cobras and Unidins, their speaker is mounted on the bottom. So this radio is the Cobra 18WX ST2. That's a mouthful. But that radio is a single DIN size. So I've got 2 single DINs in the double DIN stock space. But the benefit to this radio is that it's a front-facing speaker. So CB is already pretty hard to understand a lot of times, and that sound with the other mounting spot going back into the dash is not ideal. So this one, I can hear it, it's facing towards me, it helps me understand CB better. The install for this, like any head unit, is a pain. I've always helped friends replace head units, and I hate wiring. It always takes a lot longer than you think it will, but all these years later, I'm glad that I did it. It is well worth it. I've got the CB antenna mounted on the driver rear. I forget what length antenna it is, but I can still fit under parking garages, which is pretty sweet. Doesn't smack the signs or anything. I'm not a CB expert, but I did meet a guy in town who tunes CB radios, and he said this one was good to go, so I'll take it. My second favorite mod for this 4Runner is the Tundra brake upgrade. It's often abbreviated TBU online and on forums, but the Tundra brakes feel amazing and give a lot of beef to these 4Runners. If you're not familiar with it, you replace your smaller 4Runner brakes with the bigger brakes of a first generation Toyota Tundra. And I think it has to be pretty specific information to get the right brakes. When I ordered my brakes, I was telling the guy it was for a 2006 Toyota Tundra V8 double cab 4-wheel drive. It was the biggest, beefiest first generation Tundra, which came with the biggest brakes that I wanted to put on this 4Runner. A lot of stuff that you do to a 4Runner, like bumpers and cargo systems and going on trips, adds a ton of weight, and the stock brakes are probably one of the weaker points of the 3rd gen 4Runners. So putting these brakes on there will solve that issue. Now I'll be honest, when I first did this, I went with some pretty cheap rotors from AutoZone. They were just some off-brand, and they felt great for a few weeks, and then they warped, which was crazy. They warped faster than the smaller Toyota brakes. So had those rotors replaced under warranty, and they warped again. So finally did the right thing, got some Toyota rotors for the Tundra here on the 4Runner, and I've been good to go for years. One note, you will have to trim the dust shield on the front brakes to fit the bigger calipers. You got to do that on both sides. And make sure that the Tundra brakes will fit under your rims. As I've read, they will fit under every 17-inch Toyota rim, but only some of the 16-inch Toyota rims. I did some research, found some guys that put the Tundra brakes under these rims, and they do clear, so just make sure you do your research before you try to bolt everything back on, and there's not enough room. So my number 1 mod for my 4Runner is the ARB Bumper. Look at this thing, it's so beefy, I love it. I love this bumper for many reasons, but I can honestly say, if I didn't have this bumper, I probably wouldn't have my 4Runner. I was in a wreck years ago on a stretch of road that's notorious for traffic and accidents. A tow truck was in front of me, it slammed on its brakes at a red light. I slammed on my brakes. I've got the beefy Tundra brakes, so I came to a stop pretty easy. But the grandma and the Ford Escape did not stop. The Ford Escape slammed into me and pushed me into the tow truck. I'll say that again. I was pushed into a tow truck, which is pretty ironic. Thankfully, everybody was safe, but the 4Runner did take a beating. The trailer hitch for the tow truck smashed right into the ARB bumper, but the ARB took the brunt of it. I remember talking to the guys in the tow truck while we were waiting for the cops to get there, saying like, man, I hope I can keep this 4Runner, I hope it's not totaled. My wife and I have taken this thing to 28 states. It's just perfect. It's never given me any trouble. But like a Toyota, I was able to drive home. Now this thing, like I said, was pretty beat up, but after a long fight with insurance, I was finally able to buy it back. I bought it back for, I think, like right around $1,000. Able to keep the 4Runner, use the rest of that money to build it back and put towards another car. I think I got pretty lucky. I found a 3rd gen Dorado Gold 4Runner just like this one at a junkyard in Kentucky. It was in the junkyard for a bad frame, but the body was perfect. So I was able to get the hood and the hatch from that 4Runner. And I'm not like a body shop mechanic. I've never done body work before. I'm just a normal car guy that does like normal things. But I was able to build this back in my driveway, which was I'm pretty proud of. I will say it's not 100% straight. You know, don't look over here, don't look down here. But I will say, bottom line, you know, it drives like nothing happened. The headlights line up, and I was able to keep my 4Runner, which is pretty sweet. When it came time to get a replacement bumper, because the old one was pretty beat up, I of course had to go with the ARB bumper again. Like I said, if it wasn't for that bumper, I have no doubt it would have completely trashed this 4Runner. So if you want an ARB bumper like this, I've got one linked down in the description below. This is the ARB 342 3020. ARB did not officially make this bumper for the 3rd gen 4Runner. This is the bumper for the 1st generation Tacoma, but they're very similar in size, and you do have to do some modifications to the front of the frame rails. You got to take the frame rail caps off, so this will slide on, but it's a perfect fit once those end caps are off, and then the rest of the install is just following the instructions. But I love this bumper. I do want to put a winch in here sometime, but this thing is beefy. Got the fog lights mounted, my Bahamas license plate. And one reason I really love this bumper is that it is period correct. It's not like a newer bumper. It makes it look too modern. It looks like an early 2000s bumper. All right, guys, these are my favorite 8 mods, my top 8 that I've done to my 4Runner. These have seen a lot of miles and a lot of years, so if you have any questions, please leave a comment. I'd love to help you guys out. I'll see you guys next time.